he's going to compliment you the entire time. He might be a little fresh.
The keystone in the arch of Star Wars.
But, I'm not going to say no to George Lucas.
Right. Sorry, I'm getting emotional.
And he's got this hulking, scary dude with the big nose and the perfect hair.
I understand. This is a safe space. This is a safe space between you and I and all of your viewers.
To Cassie and Jim on the beach, and people are like, no. I can literally hear people that go, no.
Rogue One was awesome. I love the Han Solo movie, and then of course I love The Mandalorian.
And like getting to talk to fans face to face and learn their names and just, get to hear their stories.
And in the world of Star Wars, there's a bunch of people who look different and are different species. There's lizard men, there's psychic baby swamp monsters.
I joke that the best thing about writing Princess Leia is everybody knows who she is, and the worst thing about writing Princess Leia is everyone knows who she is.
And also you get Ewoks, and I am definitely a lover of Ewoks.
You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Yes, it's a good thing. It's a great thing.
Well, welcome to Around the Galaxy, the Star Wars fan talk show. I am your host, Pete Fletzer. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're joining us on this moment in time, that means that you're a patron, and thank you so much for joining us. If you're not a patron and you want to become one, all you got to do is go to atgcast.com and click join ATGcast is what the button says, but it gives you this opportunity to be a part of this conversation and join us as we record live with our special guests. And this week we have a really great opportunity to speak to a gentleman named Nick Ghanbarian. Nick is the bassist for the band BAYSIDE, and he is a podcaster. Not only does he have a music show called Radio Show, but he's also a Star Wars podcaster and a damn good Star Wars podcaster as well. He does a show called Thank the Maker. He does it. It's with the bassist from the band Story of the Year and William Ryan Key from Yellow Card. It's three rock and roll musicians. What am I, 90? No, I'm 50, but I'm not quite 90. Some great bands getting together and just talking Star Wars like anybody else. And it's a lot of fun. And today I'm excited to introduce Nick to join us and have a great conversation. Nick, how are you doing? Sorry about that intro, man. That was a little messy, but
I loved it. It was great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So you have let's just start with the band stuff a little bit. Mm-hmm. You first of all, I want to make sure everybody knows you have a tour coming up. You are braving the world and going out on tour. When does that kick off?
August 28th is the first show in Florida. It's been a hell of a year and a half. I mean, I've been a musician since I was 17, toured professionally since my early 20s, and it's the longest I've ever been off the road. And besides a couple of other little side gigs here and there, I mean, 95% of my salary, my livelihood is touring. So it's been tough to make it last for the last year and a half. And, the way, cases are kind of going up right now, we're not thinking about canceling the tour. It's more about keeping us safe while we're out there. So
sure.
That's kind of where we're at. As far as last week, we had our first meeting about what our day-to-day life is going to be on tour, and just kind of minimize risk is the best term that we could come up with. Is can't just go out there like nothing's wrong. We got to really make sure the odds are in our favor for none of us to get sick.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's a scary time. And like you said, I mean, for you, it's been what you've done for, your whole adult life. It must've been a tough year kind of hanging at home and how did you record? How did you keep yourself, in the right mindset for the past year and a half?
Like especially early on when there was just like no information and it was just lockdown city, just stay home. I mean, I really did allow myself to relax for the first time in a long time. I mean, I always say, we make a good middle-class living being musicians. There's nothing, too glamorous. It's not the 80s or the early 90s for us. It's definitely a blue-collar lifestyle that we lead. But, I allowed myself to have some time off early on before I started to let that kind of, what's the best way to put it? That, you feel like you should be productive, like
Yeah.
you need to be doing something constantly. And I just had to sit down and talk myself into just saying, you know what, it's okay. This is a once in a lifetime thing that's going on, and it's okay if you played 2 hours of video games. I'm not a gamer at all, and I started and ended within a couple of months of the pandemic. I hadn't played anything since PlayStation 2. My buddy gave me a PlayStation 4, and I just started immediately playing NHL hockey, not even online, just by myself, created a character, put myself on the Rangers, just played for hours and allowed myself to do that. But yeah, other than that, I mean, we didn't do much as a band, recording wise. We had just put a new record out, so we weren't really planning on writing anything anytime soon, really. We put a new record out late 2019. That's it. The only thing we did band wise for the last year and a half, we put out a 5-song acoustic EP. That was took us a weekend to do. 2 of the guys flew out here to do that. They live in Nashville. And then early this year, we had our 5th record called Killing Time turned 10, and we did a live stream for that. So me and Chris, who live out here in California, flew to Nashville, recorded that, and put that out as a live stream. So, podcasting was something that I did pretty early on in the pandemic that took up some time and kept me sane. Recently, I started a radio show on Spotify. I took up running because the gym was closed. So I've been running a couple of 5Ks a week. I mean, I really, as a musician, going back to that whole blue collar mentality, like I really do take free time as a part of my payment, like I don't have to work a 9 to 5, thankfully. Like I've dedicated so much of my life to being a musician, and it really sucked having that taken away from me. For it wasn't like I quit or got fired or anything like that. It was just something that none of us could do. So yeah, I mean, it was difficult mentally in some cases, especially financially, not being able to like earn money. So we all made it last, but I just kind of valued time. I valued every day as much as I could, and knew that this was like a once in a lifetime experience to just be able to sit home, experience. I moved to California like almost 5 years ago, so it's the longest I've ever like been here, all in one chunk. So I don't know. I mean, I want to say I just chilled. I definitely was productive because me and my drummer have a coffee roasting company. So that took up a lot of time this year because we were finally able to dedicate a lot of time to it because we weren't on the road. So we roast coffee together, and we kind of just did a bunch of projects, came across a couple of different cafes that needed to, that wound up using our coffee. So that kind of took up a little bit more time, but at the end of the day, I allowed myself to chill when I needed to.
What is it about rhythm sections and coffee, man? I'm a coffeeholic. Charlie Benante, when he was on my show, we talked about coffee. It's like there's a thing there. I don't know what it is, that bass.
I mean, for us, it was really just, me and Chris are always kind of the battery back there, the rhythm section battery. And we were kind of just always into similar stuff ever since he joined the band in 2006. So part of our daily touring routine would be hop on our bikes and find the best coffee roaster in every town. And that's where we came up with the idea to start our own company. And then, over the last couple of tours, we actually were able to go to different roasters and cafes and kind of talk business a little bit, drop off samples and kind of just make friends. And, never, we're more band guys than we are business guys. So we almost like run the coffee roasting company as if it was a band. But it was weird. Last year, like I said, it was the most time we've got to dedicate to it. So it actually, had some legs under it. We always kept it like at bay because we knew we toured and we would have to like shut it down every once in a while we were gone. But, the last year and a half, we've spent so much time building it up to a point of us, hopefully in the next year or so, potentially like having our own cafe and that type of thing. So that's been going great.
That's great. That's it's so cool to have, like you said, that is one of the pluses to being a musician is you do have, different hours, so you can invest in your time in things that you're interested in. So maybe I'm going to talk bass a little bit because I'm a bass player. Have been since I was in 4th grade, I think, or something like that. And but so how did you get into bass? How did you end up picking up the bass and like making it your instrument?
Yeah, it was kind of by not by design. I knew I wanted to play an instrument. Like really the first So I was born in 1980, and I would say around like 94, 93. I mean, I definitely was into like the grunge era, but not obsessed with it. Like I like Nirvana, Soundgarden, all that type of stuff, but nothing really made me obsessive about music until Green Day came out, and I did the whole reverse engineering of punk rock from that point on, you know, and found all the bands that influenced them, and found the whole Southern California and Northern California punk scenes, then found New York, you know, hardcore and punk and all that type of stuff. So it was one of those really exciting times in your life where it was just so formative, and you just were a sponge to like every you know, piece of information, and every like band that was linked to another band. It was always so much fun to kind of just find those links there. But I would say for sure, you know, Green Day kind of being a mainstream band was when me and all my friends started to pick up instruments, and it just so happened that like the first friend picked up a guitar, then my second friend picked up drums, so I was like, I guess I'll play bass. So it wasn't really by choice that I picked the bass, but it was for sure something, you know, being a musician, I felt like was on the cusp, and I was like, well, I could either play guitar and we could look for a bass player, or I could just play bass and then we have a band. That's kind of how that went.
So who are some of your influences? It sounds like that. Well, obviously Green Day, but who else?
It's you know, it's really crazy to think that like early on, obviously Green Day and like Matt from Rancid's like the as far as I'm concerned, the best bass player to be like in a functioning band. But he's ridiculous. I could never play some of the stuff that he does. But
and the sound that he gets is so sharp and
it's like so it's such a Rancid sound, you know. You couldn't put that sound in another band.
That's true. Yep.
So, you know, trying to emulate them is how I learned to just learn my way around the bass. But since I was 17, I've been in bands, so really I never stylistically evolved past that like kind of mid 90s punk bass. I think just as bass players are, they're normally, you know, more low key. I'm definitely a chill dude, so like I'm not looking to be Matt from Rancid in my band, you know. Like I'm looking to support the band and you know, throw some fun notes here and there, and I never wanted to be like the focus of the attention. But yeah, I mean, I honestly, in a weird way, like I've never tried to learn any like Foo Fighters songs or anything like that, but I feel like stylistically I wound up playing more like Nate from the Foo Fighters and Sunny Day Real Estate, where he's just kind of classy, you know, like he's there to class up the joint. He's not there to run the joint.
Yeah, the way I put it is tasteful bass playing, right? You know, he's there. He's not going way outside the lines, but playing where he's supposed to, and it's the perfect choice for the songs, which is great. Which is great. So I was telling you before we got on, the way I discovered this opportunity to talk to you, it's very funny. I was funny to me. I don't know how many people think it's funny, but I discovered you guys about 10 years ago. There were two bands that I hit around the same time as you, and I found you guys to be sort of like somewhere in the middle. I got really into Death Cab for Cutie. I thought that, you know, in fact, I kind of feel like there's a lot of times there's a similar sort of flow of the melody line. It's something that they might do. And Coheed and Cambria. And you guys, with sometimes your harmonies are like, you have that similar, but what you have that's so unique is that just sort of that drive. And I really got into it. And so I'd followed you guys on the various social media channels. And then a couple weeks ago, you posted you were buying there's a brand of amplifiers called Orange. I play Harkeys, nice. But you play, and they have a model called the OB1. And you posted something like, I might just buy this because it's named OB1. And I was like, wait a second. And then I did some research and found your podcast and all kinds of things. So, tell me a little bit about your Star Wars journey. When did you discover Star Wars? When did it take hold of your life?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite part of this story is that my mother tells me, like pre me having memories, my mother tells me that I was glued to the TV. So I might call that brainwashed. You know, I might be brainwashed, but you know, I have early memories specifically revolving around Kenner toys and all that type of stuff. Well, of course, I loved the movies, but I just think that era, you know, that first era of toys being made was like so key to, you know, sparking imagination and being creative and stuff like that. So a lot of my memories had to do more with collecting toys. Of course, I love the movies, but I didn't really get nerdy about the movies until, in my 30s, really.
Yeah.
I loved, when the prequels came out, I loved those in a different way for sure. But like early on, it was just always about playing, it was always about playing with those toys and replaying scenes with my father in my house, like chase me down the hallway like you're a stormtrooper and I'm Han Solo, or like take all the sofa cushions off the couch and toss them on the floor and it'll be like we're in the trash compactor, that type of stuff. It was just allowing my my imagination to run wild. So I was an only child till I was 9 too, so I played with some kids around the block, but mostly it was my parents and toys keeping me having fun at home. So
It's
so that's
interesting.
it. Yeah.
It's interesting because I was thinking about it the other day, because there's being as active on Star Wars Twitter as I am, I see people who watch the movies like all the time. And I realize that I watch every single Disney Plus thing that comes out as it comes out. And I never miss it. I literally set the alarm for early on Friday morning so I don't get the spoilers and all that stuff. But I realized that I don't watch the movies so much as they are a part of my life.
Oh, totally.
And
yeah.
I mean, it's not like I spend, okay, it's Saturday, I'm going to spend 6 hours watching the original trilogy. That's what we're doing this week. It's just, it's there. And it sounds like it was a similar situation for you as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I'm going to be 41 on Friday. So we're within the same age group. And it is, the internet has really helped us all find, a larger Star Wars community. And like, when I look back at, now that I'm more active in it, when I look back at photos of like the first celebration or what Star Wars like meetups were in the 90s and stuff, like we all owe so much to those people for keeping it around, like the fans, whether it was reading novels or comics, when really the only thing that was going on in Star Wars was that stuff. It's like it never left pop culture. It's been like the most, since the Beatles, the biggest thing that affected pop culture, really. And that's the beauty of it, is that it's generational. And really what sparked my like new excitement for it was Disney buying Star Wars and Lucasfilm and knowing that there's going to be, as long as I'm here, there's going to be new Star Wars. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because there's, if some of us are lucky enough, specifically with Star Wars, to have like a through line of something that you love for your entire life, like it's just a beautiful thing.
It is pretty wild. I always say, like, if you told 15-year-old me that when you're when you have your own kids, there's going to be new stuff coming out every couple times a year, it's crazy. And that's one of the things that I find a little bit frustrating about some of the conversation online is people complaining about stuff. It's like, no, what, there's good Star Wars and there's stuff that you don't love, but there's always something to talk about, right?
Yeah. And it's just, the internet is the internet. And there's a time where, whether I want to like argue or disagree with people on Twitter to, my face turns blue. There's a time when that happened. And then like, I don't know, like, I don't want to call it growing up or learning or whatever happened over the process of the last 5 or 6 years. I'm just like, listen, there's actually no reason. There's no point in arguing on the internet. Nobody wants their mind changed. Right. And the loudest voices are the meanest voices, and there's less of them. So, but somehow they're the loudest. So to me, it's just pointless to either engage, a troll or someone who's negative or whatever. But there's just no point in trying to change someone's mind, because no one's going on Twitter or Instagram or whatever and looking for discourse to have their mind changed. It's just not, whether it's politics, pop culture, anything. Nobody's like, I don't know, like, I think I want to go get my mind changed. Let me log on to Twitter. It's just not what's happening. So I don't see a point in, engaging in it. And, with our podcast, we air our grievances all the time on stuff that we don't like, but it doesn't mean that we hate it. We're not going to talk about Ryan in particular on a podcast, still doesn't vibe with the prequels, but like, we let him air it when he wants to talk about it. And, I just saw yesterday that like The Last Jedi was trending again. And I'm just like, come on, like, Are you like, is nobody like, I'm not trying to be like, I'm a high mountain saying that I'm better than people, but like, have you not learned? Have you not got tired in the last 5 or 6 years about talking about this
Right.
stuff? Like, it's just get over it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just you make a great point too, because you're not going to change anybody's mind. And the point of getting out there and just shouting an opinion doesn't get you anywhere either.
Yeah.
And so it's there's one particular guy who direct messages me. He won't let it go, and I tell him, like, you've become a cartoon character, man.
Yeah,
you're
right.
like you're literally like kind of coming in and saying the same thing all the time people expected from you. But yeah, I mean, I try not to get hung up in it either, because it's frustrating because of the fact that, yeah, you know what, like, and I think you guys talked a little bit about it on your show recently. There was a see, by the time this airs, episode 15 will be up, but episode 13 was what I just listened to you guys talking about, of the Bad Batch. And yeah, it was not my favorite Bad Batch, but you know what? It was my 13th favorite episode, right?
Yeah,
so it was
right.
still fine. I mean, that's I got Star Wars on a Friday morning.
Yeah, right. It's in some weird way, it's almost like a relief that I didn't have to, like, it wasn't such a heavy episode that I had to dissect it and think about things and theorize and start texting friends and all this stuff. In a weird way, it was like, I got something new from Star Wars, but I don't have to lose my mind over it. That's a good feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about that podcast and tell me a little bit how it got started and who's on it and sort of your sort of the position of your podcast and what you're trying to do with it.
So early 2020, I got an email from from BAYSIDE's manager saying that Ryan from Yellow Card wanted me to be a guest on him and Adam from Story of the Year's new Star Wars podcast. Immediately, I said yes. At that time, this was pre-pandemic. Ryan lived in Los Angeles. I live closer to Disneyland in Orange, California. So Adam flew out here because they wanted to go to Galaxy's Edge. They wound up coming to my house to film one podcast specifically about Solo, because they had just started the podcast and they wanted to cover all the movies first. So he gave me a choice between, I want to say, Rogue One and Solo, perhaps. And I chose Solo because I was actually on tour with Ryan when he was auxiliary musician for Newfound Glory when we were on tour with them. So me and Ryan actually saw Solo together in Pittsburgh while we were on tour. So I felt like, all right, that's enough of a story for me to like choose this. And I genuinely love Solo. They came over, we recorded an episode, and I'm pretty sure it was the next day. I don't think it was the same day. I think the next day Ryan just texted me and was like, hey, that was really great. Like, would you consider like just coming on as a third host? And at that point, again, pre-pandemic, I was like, I don't really know what's going on in my life. We're going on tour in like what I thought was going to be May or June. I was like, I was thinking about it too much. And then I was just like, you know what, screw it. Like, you're literally like, just say yes and go with it, you know? Because like, I knew Ryan. I didn't know Ryan well. We had done no real touring together besides Warped Tour, which isn't the most, you know, like I didn't hang out with Ryan every day. There was hundreds of people on Warped Tour and whatever. So that being said, then I just said yes, and we just went for it, you know, like I just kind of was like, yeah, for sure. Like, let's do it. It took a little bit of like a feeling out period, and really, and we just used the pandemic where we had nothing else to do. We used that to just kind of like grow the podcast and craft. Like I had been a guest on podcasts before, but I'd never really thought about the other end of it. You know, I was always the guy answering the questions. I never thought about like hosting and because I didn't know them that well, I think it took like a solid, like I would say half a year before like we found our flow. And then, you know, the podcast, it lives somewhere between, I think it started off in a good place because of our lineage with our bands. But I think that we kind of found a lot of the Star Wars community, or the Star Wars community found us. And now we kind of live somewhere in the middle where like we don't have to sit there and talk about our bands a lot, but there are people who found us because of the bands, who stuck around because they love Star Wars. And we never position ourselves as saying that we're like the ultimate, you know, Star Wars Bible. We're learning as we go with a lot of stuff too. And I think that we position it still to this day that maybe you only like the original trilogy, but maybe you like Yellow Card, Story of the Year, and BAYSIDE. come listen to our Star Wars podcast and learn a little bit more. Join the community. Like it's not something that like every Star Wars fan has to like know every single trivia question that ever existed. It's like we're all learning, and it's something that like if you're nerdy about Lord of the Rings or sports or wrestling or whatever it is, it's like there's a community behind everything, and that's the best part of life, is just finding people that you have something in common with, that you could commiserate with. And Star Wars is something that has so many more levels than a lot of people think. Someone could be like, oh yeah, I love Star Wars, and then realize, wait a minute, there's more than 9 movies. It's like, yeah, of course there is. Let's go take a deep dive.
Yeah, and that's great to hear, because that's what that's kind of the positioning of this show, is like finding. I always think about it this way, like when we were kids, like I believed, because the internet didn't exist, at least when I was a kid, and so I sort of had this feeling like Star Wars was this special thing that just me and a couple of my buddies had. Like it was like the 4 of us, and we were the biggest Star Wars fans in the world. Never mind the fact that it was like on the cover of Starlog and Time magazine and everything like that, right? But we believed we were the big. And then the internet explodes, and even like when I first started doing Star Wars Galaxy stuff in the 90s, it was just started, like it was just amazing to find all these people. And to your point, there is every kind of level of Star Wars fan. There's I always think of it like my dad's the guy who got me into writing. He got me into my science fiction and horror stuff that I get into. And he's a Star Wars fan, but he's not a sweaty Star Wars fan like me. Like when Ahsoka showed up in Mandalorian, he was like, I don't know who that was, but that was pretty cool. And I was like, oh my God, it was Ahsoka. Right? So it's and that's the thing I think people forget, especially in the social media space, right? And even in the podcasting space to a degree. And I think you're finding it, and I find a little bit on my show as well, is you got to remember that not everybody has, can tell you that, season 3, episode 14 of the Clone Wars was when this character did that. It doesn't matter. There's like so much more to it. And 99% of the fans are more in that camp, are more in the camp of the people who just go to see the movies. I'll never forget. We went to go see Rise of Skywalker every year. That was the great thing about the Disney sort of launch of Star Wars, was we had this sort of annual Christmas time Star Wars movie, and my wife and my kids and my wife's brother, his wife and their son, we'd go see whatever new Star Wars movie there was. And after Rise of Skywalker, my sister-in-law says to me, I thought that Baby Yoda was in this. Like, and then it struck me, like, she doesn't even know anything about that whole thing. And that's so great though. It's and so I love that you're being able to pull in people who are like, I was a fan of the band, so I'll listen to the podcast, or I'm a fan of Star Wars. Oh, and these guys happen to be in a band or be in bands that I've heard of or not heard of. And that's a really cool thing.
Yeah. We noticed, we haven't really we started off heavier on guests, and to varying degrees, they kind of like moved the needle as far as how many streams we got. Like obviously, like Ashley Eckstein was like a big one for us at the time, because we also kind of combined it with us reviewing Return of the Jedi. So it wasn't necessarily Ashley Eckstein's on to talk about Ahsoka. It was kind of like Ashley Eckstein, the person, talking about Return of the Jedi, which was pretty cool. Yeah. And she's just a great person. So, but we found like past that point, because that's well over a year ago that I think we had her on. Past that point, a lot of guests, especially from like the music world, didn't really move the needle, which made us feel like we kind of went into the Star Wars podcasting territory a little bit more than we had assumed. We thought maybe we were in like the music podcasting with like the subreddit of Star Wars, where now I feel like it's like kind of equal, where people are coming back because they like the show, and like the guests are fun to have, but they don't really move the needle at this point. Another one, like we had why am I blank? Not D. Bradley Baker. Why am I blanking on Obi-Wan Clone Wars?
Jonathan.
Yeah.
Why
am I blanking?
This is
just us two old guys can't remember.
I'm sure it'll show up in my.
You all know, yeah. So either way, like that was so much fun, and he was like such a great guest to like ham it up. Like we weren't asking
James
him to do
Arnold Taylor.
voices.
That's
James
it.
Arnold Taylor.
Darn it.
So it's like he was just like couldn't stop doing voices, and we weren't asking him to do it, but it was just so much fun. And I was just like, I can't, like, it's so awesome that there's so many people behind the scenes that like care about Star Wars and want to be able to do things like this. And I don't know, it's fun to have guests, but it's also fun for like just the three of us to like kind of do the whole podcast thing where we're just like being nerds and making jokes and whatever, and it's all under the umbrella of Star Wars. It's a lot of fun.
It's wild too, because like you said, and I find it even on this show, the level of love for Star Wars that the people who are making Star Wars have. And I think that speaks to the fact that, it's 40 plus years old now, right? It's 43, 44 years old. And we all grew up with it. And whether you are a very sort of focused, nerdy fan who knows everything and reads everything, which I'm like, I didn't even know where I'd put myself, because I can't keep up with the novels.
Yeah,
I don't read the comic books. I love the films. I love all the Disney Plus stuff. And or it's now coming from people who have been, honestly, I think it's great because you can feel like they're excited that they've been given this opportunity to make some noise in this space.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I do my best to read a bunch of novels. I'm definitely not a completist when it comes to that. Comics, I'm pretty far off of, but I've stayed on top of the High Republic, like mainline, pretty much. So yeah, I mean, especially on tours, a lot of time, and if I'm traveling, there's a lot of time to read. So to varying degrees, I have terrible reading retention. Comprehension's fine, reading retention is terrible. So like I'll read something, have a great time with it, and then when we're talking about it on the podcast, I'm like, I read that book, but I don't remember. So it's kind of just not as fun. It's fun while I'm reading it, but it's not fun because it doesn't like stay in my brain past like a week.
Yeah, and the problem is, geez, there's so many, right?
Yeah,
they just keep coming out, and there's just no way I can keep up with them either. And it's really funny. I've had almost every one of the major authors on the show, and that's like been sort of the thing that sort of forced me to be like, all right, I got to read Kevin Scott's latest book. I got to make sure I at least know that one. That's been kind of my push.
I enjoyed the first High Republic novel, and I'm waiting for Tor to roll around to start the second one.
That's great.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about some of your favorite Star Wars stuff. I mean, let's talk a little bit of Bad Batch, because you were just talking about that, and I know you're probably prepping for your show as well. But what you made an awesome point on your latest episode that maybe Bad Batch isn't designed to have major galactic implications. Maybe it is just a fun sort of Star Wars story. Do you still feel that way? And what other kind of, how has the show sort of impacted you over the first several episodes?
I think we're, as much as we've learned to not go overboard with speculation, and we're not the biggest speculators like on our actual podcast. We kind of do speculation for Patreon and all that type of stuff, because as a Star Wars fan goes, your mind gets going and you think about the possibilities. But I mean, I'm open to it kind of steering towards them having like an impact on the galaxy, but not really. I just kind of go back to thinking about season 1 of Clone Wars or season 1 of Rebels, and like those were not super impactful. So we're still in, like, this is really the first time that like we're getting besides season 7 of Clone Wars, we're getting a brand new animated series that's weekly in the era of Star Wars podcasting and thinking and overthinking Star Wars. So like everyone, we all want to like podcast and throw YouTube videos up and do all this stuff. But sometimes you're just going to get an episode 13, and that's when you have to be like, oh, maybe this isn't meant to be like dissected. Filoni and Jennifer Corbett, like all the people behind this show in particular, they're not sitting here thinking like, oh, this episode doesn't really have anything that podcasters can talk about. Like they're not, that's not the way they're telling stories. So I don't know. I'm open to it kind of just being fun and having like a very low grade connection to the galaxy. But it's also in like such a formative time for Star Wars, like in canon Star Wars, that like I'm sure season 1, as much as like I think I said this on our last podcast, as much as like one pilot episode kind of tests the waters for an entire season, then you just kind of like zoom out, and the first season is kind of like its own pilot where like they're doing character development, laying seeds for future stories, all that type of stuff. So I think at this point, Omega being I mean, obviously since the beginning we've known she's a clone, so she's a Fett, but kind of getting a couple episodes ago the fact that she was kind of like, basically in line with Boba, I'm like, all right, that's going to be a bigger story that it might not really have huge implications. It might just be a cool story, but then they have Book of Boba Fett coming out, so maybe there's just something out there that. This is the funny part about speculating. You could only speculate based off of the info that you have.
Right.
Meanwhile, people are writing this stuff right now, so they're coming up with other things. So that's why like speculating is fun, but I like stop after a while because I'm like, you know what? There's people in a writing room somewhere that's literally making up new facts that we don't have. So like this isn't a puzzle to be figured out based off of the facts we have. They're writing it as we go. So speculating is like fun up until a certain point. So
it's an interesting
long
time.
Answer, but
but it's an interesting time to be a fan of really kind of anything like Marvel or even DC and Star Wars, because of the fact that there is so much content, right? So and I'm such a big fan of the week to week versus the bingeability.
Oh, totally.
Otherwise, Stranger Things, people listen to it or watch it rather, and it's gone in the weekend, right? People have already talked about it, they moved on. But now we have this great thing where we could talk about, I honestly, I don't know that I would have cared much about Falcon and Winter Soldier if it wasn't week to week, right? I got so sucked into that particular story. But it is a great time. But I think it's my theory or my feeling, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it, is I think we run a little bit of a danger in that over speculating because we set ourselves up potentially for disappointment. I walked out of Last Jedi. In my head, I knew what Last Jedi was going to be, and I was wrong on every every single beat. Like I think everybody was, right?
Yeah.
But I came back to really love that movie for what it was. Do you feel like, the over speculating, the podcast world that we live in, the social media world, where as soon as the episode ends, you go on Twitter and you start seeing what people are thinking and you start writing your notes for your podcast. Do you feel like it potentially sets you up for disappointment, or how do you manage it so that it doesn't?
Yeah, but I think it goes back to like something that we were talking about earlier, where it's like you have to learn. You have to learn to not do that. We all did that, especially after The Force Awakens, where all we did for 2 years was set ourselves up to be disappointed by The Last Jedi. So it's like that's all on us. But then a couple more years of doing that with The Rise of Skywalker and then Mandalorian coming along, it's like you have to be able to like learn to not set yourself up. It's like a lot of people maybe don't have that within them to like look within themselves to like learn and be like, I have to change my behavior. But that's why we say it on the podcast. It's like you can't just be mad on the internet for the rest of your life. Like really think about the next 20 years of your life. Do you really want to just hate everything and argue with people? It's like, no. Okay, so then work back. What's the issue here? So I mean, to me, it's really just about realizing that you're not changing anyone's mind, like we said online, and like just why are you here? You're here because you want to have a community and family and talk to people who enjoy something that you enjoy. So that's got to be ultimately like the goal you keep in mind. And the whole like we as a community, I think we set ourselves up to feel a little weird with some of the stuff we watched in the last couple of years, and then you kind of relax a little bit, and then you go back and watch The Last Jedi and be like, yeah, it's amazing. It just wasn't what we were expecting necessarily, and it wasn't exactly what we speculated about. And it's amazing in its own way. And then to me, like everything, there's a couple of little things in the sequel trilogy that I would have loved to have seen happen differently, but overall I'm really happy with it. And then I go back to look at what the Clone Wars did for the prequels. and how
Right.
much heavier the Clone Wars series made the prequels.
Right.
That's something that has happened already, like a template that Lucasfilm could go back to and say, how do we improve the sequels, or not even improve? How do we kind of make certain things heavier with an animated series? You know,
Right.
like something like that, which that would be at the top of my list at this point. Is something to do with like, I know the movies are kind of butt up against each other, but some kind of story that kind of is intertwined between Force Awakens and Last Jedi that makes both of those movies better, you know?
Yeah. I think that it's interesting that we're seeing some of the, the cloning things and all these connections. And I feel like the Disney Plus series is, I don't know what the plural of series is doing a nice job. I think my own personal opinion is, I'm not sure, because of, as you said, the sequels are pretty close together. There's not that big of a gap, but perhaps what these other series will do is tie all 9 together better, right? Like I felt like my biggest challenge, and I've said it before, and I to your point, there's no point in litigating my issues with Rise of Skywalker. I didn't hate it. It's just not my favorite of the movies. There were opportunities. However, I think what we're seeing now is some connections being made that now you're going to watch those stories and be like, okay, so that actually ties back to Mandalorian or something like that. And people again want to say, oh, they're fixing it. They're not fixing it. They're expanding this universe that we love, right? Give me all of it. Give me all the maps and the stories and the, whatever you can tell me about that universe.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think it's a good point that you say, like, they're not fixing it. They don't think anything is wrong. They didn't put a wrong character's dead, like put him in by mistake, put him in the movie or something.
Right.
There's nothing to be fixed, but I think it needs to be amplified, to use that word again. Like, I think that why would you not want to? You have the opportunity to make everything overall better. So why not take that opportunity? And you have so many outlets to do it where, there's going to be, I mean, I don't know how ratings and streams work with Disney Plus, but I'm going to guess millions of people, probably watch The Bad Batch and Clone Wars season 7 and more so Mandalorian. But you have this opportunity to just enhance the entire galaxy, and it's such a good time. So I don't know why people, I mean, it is that immediacy of like, it's the same thing in music. If your favorite band put a new song out and then you listen to it once and go straight to Twitter and be like, didn't really like it. I'm like, you listened to it once. Like, what are you talking about? Like, then that one, you listened to it once, you tweeted that you didn't like it, it might stop someone else from even listening to it because you're like, oh, I heard it was bad. And it's like, what's the point here? Like, you can't, like, it got to be a little bit more constructive with your criticism, I think.
100%. And you'll understand this possibly more than other people on the show who I've said this to, but like, if you don't like something, it's okay. Like I use Metallica as an example. I was a huge Metallica fan, and the last couple albums I've been like, but that doesn't mean that I hate Metallica. It means that I still have my first 4 or 5 albums that I played to death and still listen to. And the fact that they're coming out with new stuff means that they're still touring, which means that I get more of it, right? So I can't complain about it. And if you love it, if you love the last album and I don't, doesn't mean you're not a fan. It just means, hey, we like different stuff. It's just the way it works.
And it's, it's such a weird thing in music because unfortunately, especially like in our era of, growing up with 80s and 90s music, a lot of bigger artists pass away and they never got, and I say this and like, it sounds funny, but I'm not joking about people dying, but like, you don't think like Nirvana is like revered as like the gold standard because they had like 3 records before Kurt Cobain passed away, and everyone loves those 3 records. You don't think they would have wrote some trash by album 5 or 6 or 7 and that would have like hurt their career? Of course they would, because everyone else who still puts out music from back then has put out trash. And the same thing with Metallica. It's like, how at a certain point, especially if you're successful, you're going to lose that fire within you. So much of in music, and I would say even comedy, I see a lot of like stand-up comedy in particular. Like, why isn't Eddie Murphy funny anymore? Like that type. It's because he's been rich forever. He doesn't have that struggle. He doesn't need to look for that the inspiration to be successful anymore, and that's a little bit of a detriment. So it happens with musicians and comedians a lot. I see that just you reached your goal and it's like hard to find what that next goal is, because you're just like, well, I wanted to be funny and be an actor and make money, and I did it. Now what?
Yeah.
Same thing with music.
I do think the EDM Nirvana album would have been awesome, though. If they did that.
Totally.
So we talked about a lot of Disney Plus stuff. There is a huge list of things on the horizon. I mean, when my buddy Scotty, who's actually, I think he's in the chat right now, there's a video of him like responding to all the stuff that Kathleen was dropping on us as fans back in November, December. That list, what on that list are you kind of most excited about?
At this point, with who we know who's cast and all that, I would say Obi-Wan for sure, because I didn't watch the Clone Wars like when it was actually like airing. But I would say it's some of my favorite Star Wars at this point.
Yeah.
So I've watched it enough, and full on, no longer when I see Darth Vader in his suit, I don't even see Darth Vader anymore. It's just Anakin. It's like manipulated, sad Anakin, and that's what the Clone Wars has done to me. So knowing that Hayden Christensen is cast in Obi-Wan is just making that whole thing just, that's what I want to see. Totally. Like, I don't know really what they could do as far as like kind of putting out new stories that really affect things, but I feel like they're gonna do what the Clone Wars did to the prequels, where the Obi-Wan series is potentially just gonna make things so much heavier. And and then I look forward to the Ahsoka series, because I think that that's gonna be like a lot of new storytelling that I think that they'll in my head, like I wonder where Grogu's been this entire time and where he is during the sequel trilogy. And now you have Rey. Is Ezra going to stick around? Whatever happened to Ahsoka? Like there's this almost in my speculatory sense, like in my head, I'm like, I wonder if post sequel trilogy is like Rey kind of putting together the Star Wars Avengers, and it's like Rey finding Grogu and Ahsoka and Ezra and them coming together and doing some, I'm sure there'll be a bad guy somewhere, like coming along and kind of running the galaxy as like new Jedi. So we'll see. That's where my brain goes with that. So I mean, for sure Obi-Wan, specifically because of whatever communication Obi-Wan and Anakin are going to have is just, I'm here for that.
Yeah. I'm dying to see. Give me Ewan McGregor in the Clone Wars armor, like in real life. Just bring that to life. That would be amazing.
Very excited for that.
What are your thoughts on, and we've seen this a lot, especially during Bad Batch, the concept of it's a small galaxy? Is it too small? How do you feel about seeing characters that we've seen before show up in Star Wars?
It doesn't bother me. I mean, I'm here. It's entertainment. I'm here to be entertained, and I'm here to, so much of Star Wars is the interconnectivity. So I think how could you complain that Cad Bane shows up when we literally have like 6 new characters that the show is named after? Right. It's like it's kind of like pinpointing something you think is wrong and like counterpoint. The show's called The Bad Batch. It's a bunch of new clones that all have different personalities that are existing in the universe. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't bother me. It's just, it seems like a complaint that's easy to write about, and it's going to keep happening. So you could kind of make it its own hashtag or whatever. Right. And the next time it happens, be like, see, it's like, no, I'm waiting for Han Solo to show up when they're on Corellia. That's what I want.
Exactly. Yeah, no, and I think that's just it's a big galaxy, but it's a story about, it's a small story, right? You want all those folks together.
But I think it's also like weird knee-jerk reaction stuff where like new characters might not do that great because people are going to complain that it's not like old school enough. It's right. Like I don't envy Lucasfilm's like story group and writing and all this stuff at all, because they have to constantly do both things, where it's here's new stuff parallel to old stuff, because some people want new stuff, some people want old stuff, and if you do one or the other people are going to complain. So they're constantly doing both, which is not the best for being creative, but
Yeah.
it kind of just is what it is. I think they do a great job with that.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think it's I mean, you are right. It's a 100% damned if you do, damned if you don't, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna have people will say, well, that's whatever. They'll find a reason to have an issue with everything. But I personally, I love it. I'm a big fan of the cameo of the week, and because it's building on all these characters that we had, and they have to come from somewhere. And that, for example, that Deveronian who showed up in the last, he'll come back some point, right?
Yeah, totally.
He'll be somewhere. Sid will, have to make a decision at some point, and her character will become something. And Hauser, and there for every character we're saying is a repeat or a cameo of the week. There's a lot of growth and a lot of interesting things happening. And honestly, Clone Wars took 7 seasons to give us all these characters. We're just getting started. I like that you're saying that, look at Bad Batch as sort of a pilot episode or pilot season and see where it goes. And as Matthew says here in the chat, Star Wars fans love nostalgia, right? And we tend to not like change, which is a very interesting a kind of a dichotomy, and it makes it sort of impossible. Like, we all want to see young Luke at some point during the Obi-Wan series, right? We want to see that kid, but of course we'll complain about it as well, or we won't, but someone will. So, well, cool. Well, Nick, I have a 10 question segment if you're ready for it.
I'm ready.
There's no wrong answers.
Awesome.
I'm not going to judge you, but I'm sure somebody will. So answer is in depth or as short as you like on these. There's a lot of fun. What is your favorite Star Wars movie, TV show, or book?
Movie, I'm going to go with Return of the Jedi. That's definitely the one that, I just love the culmination of the hero's journey. And as much as in my adult life, I say that Leia is my favorite character. Growing up, Luke was my guy. So I love seeing that for sure. And, series, I'll go with Clone Wars for sure. And book, I will say, if you're going to read one canon book, Bloodline by Claudia Gray is just a phenomenal book centered around Leia and kind of pre-Force Awakens, and it's just such a good book.
It's one of those ones that, and I think it's one of what I love about that book is exactly what I love about Din Djarin in Mandalorian is it exposes that the rest of the galaxy doesn't know what we know. Right. And it's kind of that Luke freaking Skywalker walks onto the ship and he's like, "Are you a Jedi?" It's like, that's great. I love that. Leia's got this really dark sort of history bloodline that she's got to deal with. And that's
never even occurred to me that no one knew that. That's the best part of the book, without really getting too deep into spoilery. That whole thing is just, I haven't read anything in a Star Wars book that was as heavy as that. I was very shocked that was revealed in a book.
Yeah, it was great. What's your favorite non-Star Wars movie?
My answer is Forrest Gump and the Royal Tenenbaums. Tied.
Yeah. Yeah. Forrest Gump that's definitely one of those ones where if I'm flipping through the channels on a Saturday afternoon, like the next 2.5 hours are gone.
It's a rare perfect movie for sure.
Yeah. Yep. And Tenenbaums is fun. It's a cool type of movie, right? It's it's funny. I've met people who love that. Those what can the guy's name? Who's the guy?
Wes Anderson.
Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
People love his movies, or they're like, I can't even watch them.
Totally. Absolutely.
But okay. So name an actor you'd love to see in a Star Wars movie. Or show, because Disney Plus is where it's happening.
Let's see. I did have, what's funny is like I had this thought because I've really enjoyed Westworld on HBO. And I really loved Tandaway Newton, and I was like, wait a minute, she was in Star Wars.
Yeah.
I totally forgot that she was in Solo. Man, there's an actor. I'm not going to answer this question great because I can't remember the actor's name. But he was kind of like a little bit of a shady character in His Dark Materials. And he was a British dude. He had a pretty unique look to him. He was in the newest season. I'll have to get back to you on what his name was, but he was great. And he had that he had what you want in a Star Wars actor, where you're like, you know what, he being in Britain, I guess he's not, being an actor from Britain, he's not like super well known, but he had done some stuff for sure.
Right.
But he would be great in like a North American sense of like, he hasn't really hit here in America yet, so he would be someone that's not recognizable, but he was such an amazing actor already. I'll have to get back to you. I forget his name.
Such a great, but you know what? That makes him a great Star Wars potential, because if you can't you know who he is, but you can't name him, like that was half the cast in Force Awakens for me. Like,
right?
I was like, I know that. Where have I seen that guy? Yeah, okay, that's where.
It's happening to me. Like, what's unfortunate to me about how prolific like Marvel is versus Star Wars is Marvel they put out so much more stuff and they need so many more actors. So they're really finding these, like, I'll call him up and coming. I'm sure that's not the right term, but like the dude who just played Kang, who was in Lovecraft Country, would have been great in Star Wars. Same, the other woman who was like the main TVA agent in Loki. She was also on the morning show on Apple Plus. Would have been great. Like all these actors, they're all winding up in Marvel because like they need actors, and Star Wars is like, yeah, we'll put out a movie in 3 years. It's fine.
We'll get to it. We missed that one. It's so if you could be any character in Star Wars, who would it be and why?
Let's see. For the living a long time, I'll just go with Yoda. I just want to be around a couple hundred years. And he's got the Force. He could use the Force, so that can't be half bad.
That's he lived a while and did some cool stuff and saw some amazing stuff. I mean, High Republic, it's but yeah. What is your favorite Star Wars sound effect?
Definitely ignition of a lightsaber. That'll get me pumped.
Can't go wrong with that. That's classic. Who is your favorite droid?
I kind of like the Eeyore-ness of K2SO, so I'll go with that. If I'm gonna have like a droid partner, I'd like it be in that like L3 K2SO, like kind of snarky vibe.
I'm with you. I've never thought of it as Eeyore-ness until you said it. Now that's exactly it. He's probably the of all the characters that I've quoted in the Disney era, I've quoted him probably more than anyone.
Yeah,
right. I see you have some stuff behind you, but what is your favorite Star Wars collectible?
Like I said, I was an only child till I was 9, so I got every single Kenner thing that I could possibly have, and that's all in my parents' house still in New York. All my stuff here, I'm looking, out this way, it's all my newer Black Series and vintage collection and stuff like that. But I would say my favorite piece that I have, I'm looking at right up here. It's an older vintage collection from Revenge of the Sith, and it's Anakin Skywalker pre getting cut up and burnt. So there's 2 different versions though. One title card says Anakin Skywalker and another one says Darth Vader. So there's a couple of figures out there that are Anakin. Well, looks like Anakin Skywalker, but it's technically Darth Vader because that couple of minutes in Revenge of the Sith where he was Darth Vader. So that's kind of my favorite thing. I have 2 or 3 different versions of kind of 3 3/4 inch figures where you're looking at Anakin, but it's Darth Vader. So that's kind of my favorite.
Are you a big collector? Are you
in the last couple of years, I've been a little bit more of a completist with Black Series. Like I've got all the red boxes, and I've stayed pretty up to date with the newest phase of them. Feeling a little uninspired lately. I think the pre-ordering everything kind of weighed on me a lot. Yeah. Plus, I just think that for whatever reason, probably for, I'm going to guess, cost-cutting reasons, like Hasbro's kind of just not putting out that great stuff. Like they're kind of leaning into, you could tell they're like reusing parts and what could we release that's like sort of a re-release with different paint or different armor or whatever it is. So I'm kind of just like slightly uninspired. I would say the only thing that I don't have yet that I don't think it's really hit the shelves yet is like Casca Reeves, you know, like just because I like wrestling too. So I'm like, oh, that's a good figure. I kind of want that. But everything else, it's like I collect because I like collecting. I don't collect because I want to have everything. It just sits on a shelf after I have it. I'm more about like that, how I felt when I went to Toys R Us when I was a kid. It's like I want to find stuff. So the days where I could go to a couple of Targets a day and I finally get what I'm looking for that's kind of the feeling that I'm going for.
Yeah. Do you go toy hunting at all when you're on tour? You're in
I had one
Madison,
good tour.
Wisconsin. You're like, oh, I'm gonna hit this Target. Nobody's
Fully,
here.
yeah. It was probably, I think it was the tour. I want to say it was probably like 3 years ago where we were on tour at Newfound Glory, where I just had like a huge box of stuff that I grabbed. But at that point, I needed a lot. At that point, I had started to really become a completionist with Black Series, so I didn't have everything. So I was still trying to like find older stuff.
Yeah.
So that was a big tour for me a couple of years ago where I found a solid like 15 like red box Black Series that I needed. And yeah, that was pretty awesome.
My challenge with Black Series is I have an 8-year-old son, and I usually have to. There was a point where, like, you have the boxes behind you. Instead of helmets, I had a bunch of Black Series behind me. And there was one day he came in and he's like, "Daddy, can I open that?" And I said no, and I was like, I can't do that. I have to. So now if there's Black Series that I really want, which I have a whole closet full, of bunch of them, I'm usually buying 2 if they're wearing armor. Because my son's all about the clone troopers and the stormtroopers and the bounty hunters. Yeah. So I'm buying 2. Which
2 is when I for sure it's like, all right, that's too cool. I have to be able to open one. So it happens frequently, but not that frequently.
If you could own any spaceship or vehicle from Star Wars, what would you own? And I'm going to take the Falcon off the table. Too many people have said that in 127 episodes.
Yeah, it's tough because this first, every time I see that thing in real life in Galaxy's Edge, it's the best feeling ever. An X-Wing I don't want because it's pretty much a one-person kind of deal. I mean, really, the next best thing to hang out on with friends is going to be the Ghost, I guess. I really like the cockpit on the Ghost. Really, really cool. So I'll go with that.
All right, that's a good one. I'm starting to become a big fan of the Marauder. I'm waiting for my Lego to show up.
Did you see? I'm not the kind of guy to take credit here, but a couple episodes back, I put we have a section, our Easter egg section on our podcast called the Den of Antiquities, and I said a couple of weeks ago that the Marauder was the exact shape of the Camino Saber Dart from Attack of the Clones.
Oh,
and then a couple, I want to say 2 weeks later, David Collins from Skywalker Sound retweeted that. Oh, man, I'm doing so bad with names today. The dude who voices Maul, sent him a text. Sam Witwer sent him a text with them side by side, and I was like, oh man, I totally put that out into the universe 2 weeks ago, and nobody else was saying that or anything. It's really such a low key thing to recognize. So I felt really good about that. The Marauder's awesome, but yeah, pull up a picture of the Camino Saber Dart. They're the exact same shape.
I'm gonna have to do that as soon as we're done here. That's cool. That's really great. Yeah. That's a great catch. And and just in my head, I can see it. That's awesome. Yeah. Wow, cool. And yes, the Ghost is awesome. It's one of the few I have. That X-Wing Squadrons, or I think it's called X-Wing. The game is like a tabletop strategy game, and you can buy the little ships. It's a weird thing, but it's the only. I've never played the game, but
it's like a strategy game.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
The only thing I've ever bought was the Ghost, just because it's so cool to have a ghost the size of your hand, which is awesome.
Yeah.
All right. What is your favorite Star Wars moment?
I'll go with a little bit of recency bias, but when Kylo in Last Jedi, when Kylo pulls the saber through Snoke and the saber kind of just floats into Rey's hand with the music hitting, then I don't know what's better than that feeling. That's what's so funny about The Last Jedi is you could almost put a super clip together of some of the best Star Wars that exists, and it's all in that movie. And then the stuff in between is the stuff that's a little faulty. But that moment with that music cue, because so much of Star Wars is the music cues.
Yeah.
Her grabbing that saber right when that first note hits I have chills just thinking about it. It's so good. So let's go with that.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned music. I have one more question, but before we get that, I want to bring up this because I tried to get Charlie from Anthrax to go down this road, and he went a different road with it. But I think that one of the reasons I got into hard rock and heavy metal was because of the John Williams soundtrack from Star Wars. I think of things like Ben's Death and TIE Fighter Attack, and just the importance of music, whether it's the sweeping music as well, because that's, I think a lot of metal and hard rock doesn't get the credit for being as sweeping and emotional as it is. But do you think that growing up with the soundtracks and growing up with the original trilogy soundtrack is as great as the other ones are, and honestly, I feel like the prequels have aged incredibly well. But how much of John Williams do you think influenced potentially your general interest in music, if nothing else?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably because I've never been, I'll openly admit, like, I'm not a nerd about playing music. I like playing music, and it's way more about like an emotional connection while I'm on stage. Like the studio up until recently was like my nightmare. I hated being like meticulous and having to play perfectly and all that. Never really was like the most creative atmosphere. It was more about like work and putting in time to like do things perfectly.
Right.
So I think it's probably a subconscious thing. It's something that, especially being younger, you have memories to smells or sounds or whatever, and like you remember a song you heard during a really good time in your life, and you have that connection. And I think that like hearing this amazing score while you're watching something that you have such a connection with that like changes all of our lives in some way, it's like it's just kind of a subconscious thing that's like built in with you. So because I'm not like overall a musical nerd, like when it comes to writing music, I wouldn't say that like I hear John Williams music and I tried to emulate it in any way with my playing. But I do think that if I'm going to think off the top of my head right now, what influence it had, I think that like I put melody above everything with music. I put catchy choruses, catchy verses, new ways to put, notes together and all this stuff. Like that's ultimately what excites me about music and finding a new band these days is, it doesn't have to be like the newest sounding thing ever, but it has to be like a new take on something classic. And I think that, I think John Williams has helped me recognize that I like, I just like big melodies.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally fair. I mean, the themes of Star Wars that repeat, the motifs, I mean, and it's hard to find one that's not amazing. So I guess I can definitely see it having that perspective. That's cool. And the final question on the list here is, what is your go-to Star Wars quote?
It's from Solo, because I think it's when they're in the shipyard breaking out the Millennium Falcon, and he says, let me get this right here. What does he say? He says, like, I don't like it. I don't something, but I accept it. Whatever that line is there. Because it's just so like I use that in normal day life. I'm like totally like a very like compromise is the best way to squash something. So it's kind of like that Lando line where he's like, I don't like it, something else, but I accept it. It's like I totally disagree, but okay.
Yep.
So
it's
whatever
the way
that
we gotta
line
do
is.
it. Yep. That's great. Cool. Well, Nick, thank you so much for spending time with us today. We got it here in the chat. I don't like it. I don't trust it, but I accept
it.
Yeah. There you go. Okay, good. Thank you, Scotty, for saving the day on that one. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. This was fantastic. Where can people keep up with you on online and keep up with the band? And also, tickets are on sale now for the tour all
Yep.
over the place. Yeah.
Yep. A couple of shows I know Denver and our North Carolina date are sold out already. But yeah, there's tickets available for every show besides those. And the easiest thing, I would say, I'm most active on Twitter and Instagram, and those are both at Nick Bayside. And you'll be able to find all my other endeavors on there, whether it's the radio show, which I do every week. Actually, I'm about to finish recording this week's episode. That'll be out on Tuesday. So new episodes of that drop every Tuesday. New episodes of Thank the Maker drop every Thursday. And then Legal Speed Coffee on Instagram. That's where Chris, the drummer of Bayside, and I put all of our coffee roasting stuff on social media. So I do a bunch of stuff. It's fun.
Awesome. Well, I can promise you that I will be ordering some of that coffee. My wife and I have really been trying to find some niche coffee, so I'll be checking that out. And you're actually, you're going to be in. Are you in Sayreville, New Jersey in September? Did I see it?
Yeah. I think it's the weekend of Labor Day. I want to say that might be Friday or Saturday.
Well, good. Maybe I'll maybe
let me
we
know.
can hook up there because I've
Absolutely.
seen many a show there. So
yeah, it's great venue. Loudest stage. Oh my goodness.
Oh my, and
the stage is so loud.
It I saw, who was the last band I saw there? I think I saw. Do you remember the? It doesn't matter. All I know is it's a great, it's a fun place to see a show too. So, well, cool. Before I let you go, could you give me a little bumper of this is Nick, however you want to say it, Nick from Bayside, whatever, and you're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Yep. This is Nick Ghanbarian from the band Bayside, and you're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Perfect. Thank you, Nick. I'm going to end the broadcast here.